back with you right here for another day of the early line. We are live on Sports Grid. It is a Thursday morning. I'm Kevin Walsh, joined by Donnie right side. The energy is here. DRS, how you feeling?
Feeling good tonight. We got NFL action in play. Wild night on the Major League Baseball card. So I'm excited for everything that we are going to talk about today.
No doubt about it. And I know you're excited for this next story because it seems like we are getting a little bit closer to that resolution on the Deshaun Watson. Dan Graziano of ESPN reporting that his sources are telling him that a settlement between the NFL and Deshaun Watson's team is approaching. Perhaps within the next 24 hours, this deal could be done, and we get the official word on just how much time Deshaun Watson will miss.
Yeah, I wish the NFLPA and the NFL would actually get on the same page, because these notions of the judge can rule at any time, but we're negotiating, as if the judge isn't actually holding off until these negotiations take place. Who knows when it's going to come? It was supposed to be, Kevin, an expedited process, but that process started 2 weeks ago. Doesn't sound expedited to me, but we should find out sooner than later, or at least we hope.
Would hate to see a long process then by their standards. One process that did feel a little lengthy, the Derwin James contract situation, but it has been resolved. The star safety for the Los Angeles Chargers has been paid a 4-year, roughly $76 million contract, which is some big-time money for a safety. Keeps Derwin James in Los Angeles for the foreseeable future.
Game-changing safety can really do a lot in that secondary, but the only issue for Derwin James over the past couple of years, Kevin, is what? Staying on the football field. If he does stay on the football field, he's going to live up to that roughly $20 million a year contract, and rightfully so. Good signing for him. A couple safeties around the league, certainly with their eye on that situation.
Some up and down news for Seattle Seahawks rookie running back Kenneth Walker. Wondering if he had a sports hernia there, going to need some surgery. How much time could he miss? He is going to need a procedure, but the hope in the building is Kenneth Walker will be ready for week 1 to go out there up against the Denver Broncos for the Seahawks team.
He should be okay. And a running back just saying, hey, here, hand the football off and run. It seems easy enough. But we know in order to get onto the field in the NFL, it's not really how well you can run. It's how do you remember your plays and you can pick up the blitz protection in pass pro. We'll see if that affects him. But as a rookie, you need all those reps you can get, Kevin. And now he's not going to get those over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, which is a shame. His offensive rookie of the year odds have been ones that we are tracking. I've talked to some people who have some early positions on him. Considering all things, felt that this was positive news for their position on Kenneth Walker. The Seahawks are in action tonight as we kick off week 2 of the NFL preseason. How about the Los Angeles Angels sneaking in to the headlines here? Ohtani with a day, 4 for 5 at the dish. A pair of singles, a triple, and a home run, and of course, an 11-7 loss for the Los Angeles Angels.
Oh, yes. Look at the FanDuel Sportsbook, though. Major movement here. Shohei Ohtani still sits plus 550 behind the minus 650 for Aaron Judge. It just goes to show you when nobody's paying attention, except us, it seems like, that odds race is not going to move much.
It just feels like that is the type of performance that would have changed the entire landscape just a couple of months ago, maybe just a couple of weeks ago, not anymore. Radio audience is live on this Thursday morning. It's Kevin Walsh and Donnie right side with you on Sirius XM, channel 159, the early line hanging out with you here. Taking a look at some of the top baseball headlines right now, including Mets, Braves. A Max Scherzer start where the Atlanta Braves scored 7 sounds like a nightmare. Not these New York Mets. 9-7. The Mets get the job done. And how about Batty? Rookie debut, first at bat, finds the seats. Mets use the long ball in a major way here and take one off the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, this was nice. Yesterday, I told everybody, say, yo, let's get on those Mets, and they team total over 4. Worked out very well. They had 4 through the second inning, cashed in the 6th inning all the way around. But if you're going to say the New York Mets, hey, man, we got 6.6 in the third innings, 4 earned runs out of Max. We might have lost that game. No, you won. The bats woke up. It's what they're supposed to do against bad pitchers like Odorizzi.
Speaking of bats waking up, Josh Donaldson with a save. The New York Yankees down 4-0 early to the Tampa Bay Rays. Bottom of the 8th inning, Anthony Rizzo ties the baseball game 4-4. It goes to extras. And at the top of the 10th, Aroldis Chapman looked like he might be able to get out of a jam. Was not. And it was 7-4 Rays going into the bottom of the 10th. But Josh Donaldson, one swing, a grand slam. Walk-off style, gets the Yankees out of their slump.
Yes, it did. And I also think every other ballpark that was a flyout. But since it was Yankee Stadium, the right field, everything is a home run. But a huge win for the New York Yankees in walk-off fashion.
Ball traveled a mammoth 349 feet. A little respect. How about saving the best for last? The top story in sports. LeBron James signs an extension with the Los Angeles Lakers, a 2-year, $97 million deal. A massive piece of news here as the Lakers right now are waiting to figure out what they are going to do to improve this roster. Is Russell Westbrook going to be moved on from? Could Kyrie Irving potentially be brought in? LeBron, though, gives the Lakers the security that they need to make those moves. Donnie, as much as I want to get your take, and I know you're chomping at the bit to give it, plenty of time. We will circle back to this story at the top of hour number 2, but we go to the NFL next right here on the Early Line.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
I don't care if they play this game in Puerto Rico. I mean, the bottom line is, it doesn't matter Seattle or Anaheim. Robbie Ray's stuff has been beautiful all season long. He's gotten stronger. He's led the majors in innings, the last 2-3 years. The guy's an inning eater. He's going to go out and do his job. He's going to go out and get into the 7th inning tonight, and he's going to strike out and go over. He's going to get another 9 or 10 tonight.
The Sports Grid Network. The Early Line.
Donnie, in this AP Top 25, what caught your eye?
Yeah, if we're looking just at, the old guard, right, which particularly pertains to the SEC, Alabama number 1, Georgia number 3, Texas number 6. So 3 teams in the SEC in the top 6. Wouldn't shock us again, Kevin, right? 2 teams out of the final 4 will end up being from SEC competition. Notre Dame at number 5.
Only on Sports Grid. The morning after.
LSU has the same odds to win the SEC at 100-1 as they do to win a national championship, also 100-1.
Well, I'll say this. There are going to be a lot of really bad takes about year one head coaches, and a lot of people jumping to conclusions because there are 8 programs who have played in a national championship in the 21st century who have a first-year head coach. That includes Virginia Tech because technically they played in a national championship in the first week.
The Sports Grid Network. Fantasy Sports Today.
Definitely a starter in every fantasy football league. He's a top 12 quarterback in fantasy, but no longer the thought process where I guess he could be a number 2, the second overall quarterback or the third. Remember in years past, he was being drafted right after the first couple of quarterbacks, but no longer the case. He's kind of like a consolation prize as opposed to the main starter for a lot of people.
The Sports Grid Network. Diamond Bets.
Fernando Tatis Jr. getting popped for a PED suspension for 80 games. Now, I know performance-enhancing drugs are something that, even here at the network, they encourage us, especially myself. They say, please, can you enhance your performance just a little bit more, Joe? This year, it's not going to happen next year for a good chunk of the season. And guess what? This is more important now that you added Juan Soto. So obviously this news rocked Major League Baseball.
Only on Sports Grid.
Back with you here on Sports Grid. Deshaun Watson news perhaps coming today. The latest is that the two sides, being the NFL and Watson's camp, are talking about a settlement. And this is something that we started to anticipate here on this show, and as we are on Moneyline Live at 1 p.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Channel 159. Why are we waiting again? At this point, the NFL has the ability to make a decision. What is it that we are waiting on here? Clearly, the desire for these two sides, really the NFL's, is for a settlement. Because the NFL does not want to have to all of a sudden be in federal court. It's not that they think that they'll lose, in my opinion. It's that it's not a good look. It's not what you want. You would rather be able to say, we've come together, we've made an agreement. It also maybe will help go a little bit further in the idea that Deshaun Watson has some contrition, certainly not that horrendous, quick 2.5-minute video that he did before the opening preseason game. That made no difference whatsoever. The signs to me, Donnie, are pointing that the NFL wants a settlement, and it does appear Deshaun Watson's camp is listening. Do you think that is where we are heading right now?
1,000%. Because if you're reading the lines here and you're saying to yourself, well, the NFL is the end-all be-all in this conversation. And what I mean by that, Kevin, is whatever they say is going to go unless you're going to sue in federal court, and it probably won't hold up. It just takes a lot of time and money and embarrassment for the NFL and the player involved. You'd rather come to a settlement. But here's the thing I don't understand. Now, it could all be different. If we hear today, let's just say by 3 o'clock, Deshaun Watson has been suspended for 1 full year. It never made it to the arbiter, and the NFL and the NFLPA came to that agreement. It's 1 year and no more, and I don't know, a $2 million fine. Let's just use that here. I'd say, you know what? Roger Goodell was correct here. All along, he said it should be at least 1 year. He got the 1 year so they could save face in the media. You're still going to take shots over no matter what happens, but at least you could say, this is what we thought the NFL wanted. I can't under any circumstance, because remember, the NFL, what they say goes here. If Roger Goodell said 3 years plus, that's what it would be, because that's written in the collective bargaining agreement. 2 years, 1 year, whatever it is. I can't understand where the NFL has taken this stance for so long that it's unacceptable for 6 games. Every time you see Roger Goodell in front of a microphone, they're pushing for a year plus. How could it get to be where they would come to an agreement of, let's just say, 8 games or 10 games and a monetary fine, and the NFL would be okay with that? If you try to equate it, Kevin, to selling your house or selling a car, let's just say you have a car in your driveway. You know what? I'm going to sell this for $20,000. But the buyer goes, how about $10,000? But whatever the number you say, Kevin, is the correct number, and you settle on $12,000. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the NFL. They hold all the cards here. And if you do, why are you going to push your chips in the middle of the table and then just fold? It doesn't make sense here. If the NFL doesn't get at least 1 full year, I don't understand what the actual process was even for.
So the interesting thing is, and the question that I've been trying to figure out, and the answer is only going to come when the suspension is finalized, I think, Donnie, is how much the NFL is valuing a monetary hit on Deshaun Watson. Because it does seem like they feel that is also important. I don't know if that's just how they think business should be done. I don't know if they believe that money is just as valuable as games played. I think I might disagree on that long term. And I don't know if it's because they are actively bothered by the Browns and Watson's trickery, for lack of a better term, in how they structured his contract. But we know that they are after a monetary hit. So I say that to say, usually I would be, look, clearly they're going to make Watson's camp agree to a year because the NFL is threatening beyond a year, and they'll wash their hands of it. I'm still trying to figure out, can Deshaun Watson offer up $15 million of fine money and then get only a 12-game suspension? That is still what I am trying to figure out right now at this situation. Again, I think the answer is going to come today for us. But do you get a similar sense to me that the NFL is not just viewing this from the games lens here, and they do believe the financials are maybe even an equally important aspect of this?
If they're thinking that way, they're completely wrong, and especially with public perception here, because you're talking about a guy who just signed a contract for $250 million guaranteed, and this wasn't even his first contract. He already had a massive contract, so money is not an issue. Take a look at Derwin James, who just signed that big contract for his safety, Kevin. Week 14, he blows up a wide receiver, and they go, okay, you have two choices to make, a one-game suspension or you pay a $50,000 fine. He pays the $50,000, and he says, I want to play with my guys next week. I can't imagine that they're saying to Deshaun Watson, let's hit him in the wallet for $5 million, let's just say, but he still collects $245 million. The price to pay for an NFL player is taking away time, and that's games played, because you can't get those back. You lose 8 games, 10 games, 12 games, or an entire season. That hurts way more to a guy making $250 million. Now, Kevin, if we saw Deshaun Watson sign a 1-year contract with the Browns for $1 million, and the NFL said, all right, 10 games and you don't get paid this year, maybe they go, oh man, that really is going to hurt him. He's not going to make any money this year if he plays the final 6 games, 7 games, 3 games of the season, right? But the fact of the matter is, if the fine is $3 million, $5 million, $10 million, $15 million, if you ask Deshaun Watson, all right, I'll take the hit. $15 million, 8 games, I'll get my back on the field and continue to make all this money I'm making. I can't understand why the NFL would even be fighting over a monetary fine. The monetary part is not the issue. It's the games. It's setting a precedent. You do this, you're out. Money is not a factor. How many times the average Joe, right? Hey, this professional athlete did this DUI or did this. He's not even getting any jail time or probation, and he's playing football again. Why? Because money rules the world. You can buy your way out of everything. The NFL should not let Deshaun Watson buy his way out of this.
I agree. I don't know if that's how they see it. I do hope that we are going to get that answer today. It feels like tomorrow at the latest. The amount of times we've said that, though, it would be silly and a bad job out of us to put a concrete timeline on anything that is involved Deshaun Watson. I did want to ask this one question, though. The Browns right now have a couple of markets that you can bet on. FanDuel Sportsbook has been very smart not to open up the miss portion of the playoff market there. The AFC, I guess there's a couple more than this, but these are the main ones I'm sure people are looking at. 14-1 to win the AFC, 3-1 to win the division, and a win total of 8.5. Juice continuing to climb under at -145. But I want to look at that top one, Donnie. It's 14-1 on the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, you were in on the Cleveland Browns. I know you're impressed by that roster. Deshaun Watson is a quarterback that if there is not a big drop-off in the play that we had last seen from him, has the chance to really elevate this football team. At the end of the day, if he were able to get to the postseason, you'd probably be happy with a 14-1 price. So here's my question. What is the number of games that Watson could be suspended where you would willingly say, give me 14-1 on the Browns, it's worth a shot?
I would need a little bit more. And let's play this out in the movie theme here. And if you remember Braveheart, right? William Wallace screaming, hold, hold. Why do I say that? Let this season play out here, Kevin. Let's just say Deshaun Watson isn't suspended for the full 17 games and can come back for, let's just say, the final 6 games. And the Browns are under 500. Who cares? It's about what you're looking for to just make it into the playoffs. If there's any time that you're going to give me like a 25-1 with an under 500 Browns team, knowing that Deshaun Watson will be coming back for, let's just say, the final 6 games of the season, I'm not betting it now. I'm waiting till they're under 500. I'm getting the better price and watching this thing play out. Now, it might be a terrible bet, but I think if Deshaun Watson comes back and plays well, that roster is as talented as anybody in the NFL.
And allows you to see where they are, how much ground he potentially could have to make up. Then again, he might miss the entire season. Not the only NFL story out there, though. The Chargers continue to pay some names, and what does that mean for their upcoming season? It's all next.
Might be the next daily fantasy millionaire. No matter what you watch or where you play, learn from the world's best DFS players. Lineup building tools, expert projections, and advanced stats change the way you play the game. Dominate the competition. DailyRoto.com, the player's choice.
Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
People are going to the betting window
Betting
and
above
betting
the
them now
rim.
before the trade takes place.
How dare
Diamond
they
bets.
do what's fiscally responsible? See how it plays out. Buffalo's going all in right
Football
now. They
full
need
circle.
all their chips in the middle of the table. It's do or die for them.
And Godwin being out, they've had a little bit of a shakeup.
In-game live all
You
access.
could take the points, you could take the money line, and
We have to go to San Jose, too. Maybe a small play on San Jose. I'm going to go both underdogs here. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Wow. In-game
Phillies
live.
here,
Prime
over minus
time.
128. You do have to lay up a little bit of wood here, Donnie, but I think against Patrick Corbin.
But boy, you want to give me 8.5 points with a desperate team facing
Get
elimination.
the winning edge. Only on Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
Pro Football Doc has found its new home right here with Sports Injury Central. And with that comes our expansion into other sports. Sports Injury Central will give you nonstop exclusive injury analysis from experienced team doctors from all three major sports. Doctors with resumes that include teams like the Chicago Bulls, the Texas Rangers, and the LA Chargers. So gain a fantasy, DFS, and betting edge right now for free at sicscore.com.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
Tell me why you're
I
so
agree.
high on Herbert and the Chargers. They never get it done.
Number one is injuries. This team seems to be snake bit. If that goes their way this year, the only thing that's going to prevent them is coaching. The coaching and the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, he has a strong-armed, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert, who is young and can throw the ball all over the field. And they have one of the shortest target depths of any team in the NFL.
The Sports Grid Network. The early line.
Donnie, in this AP Top 25, what caught your eye?
Yeah, if we're looking just at, the old guard, right, which particularly pertains to the SEC, Alabama number 1, Georgia number 3, Texas number 6. So 3 teams in the SEC in the top 6. Wouldn't shock us again, Kevin, right? 2 teams out of the final 4 will end up being from SEC competition. Notre Dame at number 5.
Only on Sports Grid.
Derwin James has secured the bag. The hold-in works again. If you're not a running back, this is bulletproof now. No fines, and the money eventually does come in. A big-time contract here for one of the key pieces of this Los Angeles Chargers defense. The concern typically, though, around Derwin James is health. Donnie, when you saw this deal come in, what was your reaction?
Reaction was good. Good for the Chargers. You didn't want this to play out, Kevin, right? The worst thing in the world is when very good football players that you are depending on, are unhappy when the season begins. It's why a lot of these contracts get done before game 1 of the regular season, so you can have that clear mind heading through like, all right, I'm going to make this hit. I'm going to put the extra time in. I'm not going to be angry every time I show up to the facility. When healthy and on the field, Derwin James is a game changer, and you needed that here. Now, I always like to poke a little bit of fun at the Chargers. Why does it seem like the Chargers need the best players at every single position on defense if they have the so-called best defensive coordinator in the entire league, Kevin? Can you answer that for me?
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. Sometimes, though, I wonder, has Derwin James maybe received a bad rap from people like myself, right? His rookie season, he played the entire year. Sophomore season, missed a ton of time. Only played 5 games. Last year, he missed 2 games. But on the heels of missing all of that time in the sophomore season, it's, can this guy stay out there? Clearly, the Chargers trust that he can with the contract that they have afforded him. His best year, his most impactful season, was his rookie season. But, again, this is a guy that is probably only going to might only get better for these Chargers here and has a world of upside and can be a major impact player. There is an outside impact that this might have. We'll get to that in a moment. It was a good catch by you, but I want to start just with what you were alluding to in the Los Angeles Chargers and the talent on this roster. If you look right now at the odds to win Defensive Player of the Year, there's a lot of Los Angeles Chargers that will jump off of the page. Joey Bosa is at 14-1, some of the best odds on the board. And a pair of 40-1s on Derwin James and Khalil Mack, the newest Los Angeles Charger. My question to you is, do any of these guys jump off of the page as not just legit in this race, but at their price worth the bet?
I think if you're like Derwin James is tough because for a safety to be the MVP of the NFL, he's going to have to do some ridiculous things. Lead the league in interceptions. The team's probably going to have the number one overall seed in the AFC. So that's maybe a bridge a little bit too far. But as always, it's all about statistics. That's why if you're a cornerback and you can be the elite, the best cornerback in the NFL, have 2 interceptions and you get passed over. Why? Because nobody wants to throw your way. But then you have players like in Dallas, when you take a look at Diggs, oh my gosh, this guy's all over the field. Yeah, well, when you're giving up a touchdown for an interception every other series, you sort of stick out a little bit more because nobody's going to see the touch. Oh, look at all the interceptions. Look at the big plays he made as opposed to the plays you're giving up, which is why you always look towards defensive end and linebackers, particularly edge rushers, because if they could get 15, 16, 20-plus sacks, approach a record, that sticks off of the page much more. And also when you take a look at a sack, look, there's 17 games in the season. Averaging a sack a game will get you paid $25 million a year. So what you're basically saying is if the other quarterback drops back 45 times, Kevin, you have to win 1 time out of 45 against that offensive tackle, and you could be the MVP. So if I'm looking at Bosa and Mack, it's almost an even split for me on where you would want to go. I want to believe that Khalil Mack comes over and says, boy, now nobody can just triple team me at all times. I'm going to get a little bit more of a free run. So I might be leaning towards Khalil Mack in this market if I had to pick one of the Chargers.
And let me just clean this up here. It's a bad job out of me. Nick Bosa is 14-1. Joey Bosa is 25-1. So you're getting longer odds on Joey. But to your point about Derwin James, if you look right now, Stephon Gilmore was able to win DPOI in 2019 as a cornerback. That was the first time since Troy Polamalu, a defensive back, if you will, was able to win the Defensive Player of the Year award. Linebackers and primarily defensive linemen cleaning up here because of that statistical dominance. Why are you throwing at the best corners in the league? You're not. You don't. Now, Derwin James is a little interesting because it could be Troy Polamalu-esque in that if he gets you 5 picks and 5 sacks with 80-plus tackles, and the Chargers' defense is one of the best in the NFL, we might be able to have a different conversation. He can impact the game in different ways. But it is a Bosa or a Mack thing. The interesting thing to me, though, with Bosa is he has had teammates before that have joined him out there on the defensive line at a super high level. And I'm not saying that Khalil Mack hasn't, but I think that you could get a reinvigorated Khalil Mack playing alongside Bosa. I think a defensive, or an offense's game plan against the Chargers probably focuses maybe on Bosa before they're able to get to a Khalil Mack there. And I think at 40-1, it makes that Mack interesting. One last thing here before we move forward. You mentioned to me yesterday how Derwin James can impact other teams and their current situations with perhaps another safety who is holding out. I've learned pretty quickly here one of your favorite stories that will exist from now until the contract is signed is the Joe Burrow Cincinnati extension, because they're going to have to pay a ton of money, and that's not usually the Bengal way. And you're seeing that on full display with Jesse Bates. Superstar might be a strong word, but a really, really talented safety for this football team who is looking to secure his money. And it seems like the Cincinnati Bengals are set on not giving it to him right now. Talk about that situation and how the Derwin James contract might impact that.
You know, it's really interesting about the overall topic there because everybody wants to get paid. Owners don't want to pay as much, right? That's always been the name of the game throughout the NFL's life. But if you're looking overall and you say to yourself, well, was that a good thing yesterday for Bates? Momentarily, you look around the NFL and say, man, he got this much money. I'm going to expect this. But even before the Derwin James signing this massive deal, The Bengals already told Jesse Bates they weren't really going to pay him this year because negotiations were trying to go on. And when he was laying out what he wanted, they're saying, no, we can afford you this year on a franchise tag, which also means next year when you have to sign Joe Burrow, and keep in mind also the Cincinnati Bengals, knowing that this is going to be a massive price tag, are selling every inch of ad space now, including their stadium name, to try to get ready for this. So if you're Jesse Bates, you see that big deal. It should be good news when maybe it's not, because let's just say he's forced to play under the franchise tag, sits out all of training camp and shows up in week 1 and signs that deal. Kevin, Cincinnati's not signing him next year either, because they're still going to have to pay Joe Burrow an enormous amount of money and then start to turn around and say, well, we're going to pay Burrow. Wait to see what the bill is going to be on Jamar Chase down the line as well. So this is one of those where your star player, who's a very good guy, expects to get paid and should get paid, is going, I don't even see the light at the end of the tunnel in Cincinnati. But Cincinnati's MO is not to say, all right, look, we're not going to be able to sign this guy. Can we flip him for a second rounder or a third rounder, knowing the next team that gets him is going to have to pay him an exorbitant amount of money? The Cincinnati Bengals have been known to say, oh, you don't want to play? Who cares if it hurts our football team? Go sit on the sideline. We're not going to pay you. So the next guy comes around and does the same thing. Cincinnati's in a pretty tough spot here. This is a team legitimately can make another Super Bowl run, but you need everybody pulling in the same direction. I don't think Bates is going to be that guy.
One of my favorite little tidbits from the Derwin James contract situation, his agent, Jesse Bates' agent. Oh, that's just perfect. That's good. This is a really interesting spot, though, because Cincinnati's obviously looking to capitalize on what they did last year, going to the Super Bowl. I'm sure Jesse Bates would love to be a part of Cincinnati long term, but let's just be honest here. That isn't going to happen. If you are Jesse Bates, can you force the hand here for a trade? He will almost certainly be extended upon the trade, like all of these wide receivers had been, and bring your money in. Would Cincinnati be willing to do that? I don't know if they would, but it's certainly something for us to keep our eye on. Would the Cincinnati Bengals win total drop by a full win if Jesse Bates was gone? No. But if you're someone that's picking them to win the division, do you want him there? Absolutely. In hour number 2, we're going to talk about Seahawks-Bears, and we were hoping to get another look at Kenneth Walker, but we're not. He's dealing with an injury. Procedure had, all in all, the positive news is they're hoping he is out there week 1. But does this perhaps shake the confidence of people that were taking a look at Kenneth Walker to bet him in the Offensive Rookie of the Year award market? It depends who you are. His number has come back to 20-1. I think you want a clean bill of health to start a season, but the positive look is it felt like this could have been a lot worse.
You know, it's an interesting point you bring up here because it all is about the betting number. Now, what did you expect out of Kenneth Walker? Let's just say he's ready for the regular season, Kevin, but he's not going to play as much as maybe he was going to be. So I was under the belief that I'm not going to bet him now because I expected him to be the lead dog in week 1 and rush for 175 yards, and that was going to buoy me for the rest of the season. You knew that wasn't going to be the case. It's a rookie. It's Seattle. They're going to spread this around. So let's just say Kenneth, he doesn't get off to the best start, meaning 100 yards, 100 yards, 100 yards, which, again, I don't think he was going to do that anyway. But aren't you now getting value? Because we've seen it before. Slow starts, but it's all about in the mind of the bettors and also the voters. Late in the season, coming on strong. If you thought he was going to be a really good running back right out of the gate at 16-1, has an injury where he might not be full go week 1, but still 16 more weeks to play, aren't you looking at this even more favorable, loving the fact that he's dropped down? I don't think this should change your opinion on Offensive Rookie of the Year at all.
Interesting. I'd rather this news not come in, but to your point, they told you he's going to be ready for week 1. And he was battling through it, so all in all, you make some sound points there. Again, we'll get to Seahawks-Bears in hour number 2, but before all of that, big action in Major League Baseball yesterday. That's coming on up.
Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
play less games.
The early
Take a look at the top 4 seeds here in the Big Ten. They're going to play less.
Rodgers
games.
and
The morning
Russell Wilson.
after.
We saw movement in the marketplace like
Orlando
Fantasy
Magic.
sports
The Cleveland
today.
Cavaliers are a little thin as well.
Newswire.
Minus 160 favorite on the money line today for Arizona.
Pharrell coast to
PBG,
coast.
that's where they win cups. They win Stanley Cups over there. Give me the
Game
Penguins.
time
Kind of
decisions.
bizarre when you consider, everybody is out for the Warriors.
In-game live
I
all
like
access.
I like Vandy against Bama. I think Vandy can win the game, take a 4.5.
In-game live. Prime time.
The PGA champion.
In-game live.
All
Overtime.
done before the final bet.
Get the winning edge. Only on Sports Grid. Diamond Bets.
Fernando Tatis Jr. getting popped for a PED suspension for 80 games. Now, I know performance-enhancing drugs are something that, even here at the network, they encourage us, especially myself. They say, please, can you enhance your performance just a little bit more, Joe? This year, it's not going to happen next year for a good chunk of the season. And guess what? This is more important now that you added Juan Soto. So obviously this news rocked Major League Baseball.
Only on Sports Grid. Pharrell coast to
Took
coast.
PEDs intentionally, and people are still going to watch baseball the rest of the year and in the playoffs and the World Series. And then next year, when everyone's kissing his ass, all of us won't kiss his ass because we know he's a user. The guy took PEDs. That's how he got all of his big fancy numbers, and that's how he got that big, fat, guaranteed 14-year, $340 million.
The Sports Grid Network. The morning after.
Well, the Niners have a better overall year than those two other teams, being the Jags and the Jets.
What's funny is I think you'd get a lot of people, though you make a good point about where the number would sit. I think you'd get a lot of people to bet the Niners. I'm high on the Niners. I still would take the combination. I'm low on the Jets. I know I'm probably walking into a real bad trap here, and I'm going to live with it. I am very optimistic about the Jacksonville Jaguars.
The Sports Grid Network.
The early line continues on this Thursday morning, taking a look at some of the big stories in Major League Baseball, and certainly a lot for us to take a look at here. We'll start it off right now with the Shohei Ohtani performance that we mentioned in the headlines here. I know we've done this a couple of times, this, hey, is this race officially over? But I wonder if, should we be a little more open to the idea that if Ohtani heats up in a major way, that could change the story. Ohtani has a start that's going to come up over the weekend against the Detroit Tigers. Are we sure? One last time, piece of, kind of housekeeping here. Are we sure that Shohei Ohtani is out of this MVP race?
Sound minds would say yes, and that would be the proper way to go. But of course, there's the other believers that would say, well, what happens if this, Kevin? 2 no-hitters, a perfect game, and hits a home run every single day over the next month, then he's going to be the MVP. But just based on the season and the way it's going, and the fact of the matter is yesterday would be a needle-moving game for Shohei Ohtani, and it moved no needles, that leads you to believe that this race is over.
Here are 2 things to take a look at. His start against Detroit on Sunday, because of how horrendous that lineup is, all right, and a 3-game series against the New York Yankees in L.A. to end August. Now, I know you might say, are those games going to matter? Clearly, you weren't paying attention when Dylan Cease became co-favorites with Justin Verlander because the Astros all of a sudden were trailing the White Sox 1-0 in the bottom of the second inning of that baseball game. And by the time the game was over, it was minus 190 ultimately on Justin Verlander. If that series begins, game one, Ohtani, if he's pitching in the series, is able to be dominant, odds might move a bit. Aaron Judge has a multi-home run game in that series. It's going to matter. I'll tell you this right now, though. Ohtani pitching to Judge. Now, that's head-to-head. That cannot be hand-waved like a Cease Verlander, even if the hand-waving was inaccurate. That will catch people's attention. Will it move the market? It depends, of course, how it plays out. One thing, though, that could impact this, though it hasn't, would be the New York Yankees' struggles. Man, sometimes you just need to win a game, but sometimes how you win it could really change the tone. The Yankees avoided a sweep at the hands of the Tampa Bay Rays. That should not be cause for celebration. But the fact of the matter is they needed it desperately. And the way it happened was everything you want out of baseball. A walk-off grand slam. That is just beautiful stuff there. And it sends them into a very important series, 4 games at home versus the Toronto Blue Jays there. How impactful do you think that Josh Donaldson walk-off home run might be?
It was huge. And how about 7 runs in the 10th inning alone, and that including that grand slam by Donaldson? But it looked like it was headed for another disaster. We were right here on the show 24 hours ago saying, hey, what's the best way to bet the Yankees? Don't bet them in the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth inning. Why? Because they have no runs, which they didn't have any runs after 5 innings yesterday, but ended up with 8 runs with a walk-off grand slam. Now, I can't imagine how many people actually stayed in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium for that game. After 3 runs scored in the top of the 10th inning, you know that's doom and gloom. You can expect 1 run with the ghost runner on second base, but anything outside of that is going to be extra juice. Only to get 4 runs from a grand slam. That has to feel good for the Yankees, the front office, the organization, and the fans, where you can go to sleep like, whoa, we still have a 10-game lead. But think about this. They still have a 10-game lead in that division. So if they would have lost that game, it would have turned into, like 8 or so at that point? It wouldn't have had any difference whatsoever here when you wake up, because you still had that big league moving down the stretch. But psychologically, massive win for the New York Yankees.
I totally agree. I think going into this series with Toronto as well, who got themselves a nice little win against the Orioles yesterday, when we're looking at that AL wild card race there, it feels like a big series. It starts tonight. Montas has the ball, Barrios for Toronto, and we'll preview that for you, no doubt about it. How about Lodolo up against these Philadelphia Phillies here? That's pretty impressive stuff. A lineup that was really getting after it. 7 innings of no-run baseball, struck out 8 overall. The one thing is, I got to tip my cap here. Now, a 1-0 final score, I'm not saying you saw coming, but hey, you said under, you sent the warning signal out, and it certainly was as under as possible.
Yeah, Suarez going head-to-head with Lodolo here, 2 lefties, and they were dealing all game long, a total of 11 hits in the game, and quite frankly, nobody was really even threatening. I believe the Phillies were like on 0 for 4 with runners in scoring position, and then I think the Reds finally cashed in with 1, but they were around 1 for 5 or 1 for 6. So a boring baseball game. So those old-school baseball guys that love a good 1-0 game, that was in the cards yesterday. Early start yesterday. We'll see with the Phillies. It's hard to sweep teams in Major League Baseball. If you have to ask the Phillies heading in to play the Reds, if you take 2 out of 3 games, would you be happy with that? They'd say absolutely. That's what happened, because now the New York Metropolitans are on deck. So we'll see if the Phillies can up their game at that point.
The Phils certainly are going to need to try, and it's so interesting, right? The story around them was beating up on good teams, making it hard on themselves for losing to the bad teams. You win a road series, you live with that, right? It's now they got to be able to do more than just beat up on bad baseball teams, the Philadelphia Phils. You bring the Mets into town, it feels like a big one. And the beauty of it is you're going to miss both DeGrom and Scherzer, which is huge for the Phils. Let's talk about Scherzer. Let's talk about DeGrom. The Atlanta Braves yesterday looking for an opportunity to take the first 3 games of a 4-game set against the Mets. If you would have told the Braves or any Braves backer yesterday, that team went out there and scored 7 runs. cash that ticket. I know Odorizzi isn't necessarily the best, but come on. 7 runs at home has to be enough to cross the finish line. No way. Run line covered by the Mets, in fact. 9-7 there. Max Scherzer was not terrible. Ultimately, he got pulled. Runs were allowed, not on his watch, but they were his earned runs. You know how the whole thing works. Scherzer was good, not great, but all in all, the Mets showed they are more than just a couple of arms at the top of a rotation. This has been a complete baseball team for the majority of this season. And now with Scherzer and DeGrom back, I maintain the scariest team in baseball. And how about this odds movement here? Minus 550 to win this division yesterday. They take this game with DeGrom on the mound tonight, minus 850 off of one win.
It's pretty incredible, and that's the way it's probably going to set up here, because you were going to get some momentum out of the Braves in the series, but whenever you have the back end of your rotation in the series being Scherzer and DeGrom, it usually works out in your favor. I thought yesterday, lining this game up, that the Mets were going to win, was more comfortable with the Mets scoring than winning the baseball game. They ended up with 9 runs, and also if you bet the run line, that also came up a win. But if you're the Braves, if you look at a game, you scored 7 runs, Kevin, and your first 5 hitters in the lineup didn't record a hit. That's pretty impressive, because that shows the depth of the Atlanta Braves. And even a game where a Max Scherzer start, Kevin, usually you'd say, yeah, that makes some sense. First 5 guys didn't get hits. Neither did the back end of my guys. We ended up getting no hit in that game. They actually put up 7 runs here. So if you're maybe a Braves backer, fan, or just a player at this point going, hey, you know what? It wasn't the worst thing in the world we lost, but at least you know what? We got to Max Scherzer for 4 earned runs in this game. If we see him down the line, we'll see if we could tackle on some more at that time. Good win for the Mets, though, but today DeGrom's on the mound. You probably can expect more of the same for the Mets today.
It's a good point, though, by you for the Braves. Hey, at least we know that you're allowed to score runs against this guy here, because he looked just absolutely untouchable for so long up against this Braves lineup here. Speaking of division movement, minus 290 on the St. Louis Cardinals. These two teams right now, these two teams being one, the St. Louis Cardinals, and then the Milwaukee Brewers, moving in opposite directions. That's what happens when one of them is hosting the Rockies versus one of them hosting the Los Angeles Dodgers. Right now, the division lead for the Cards is 3. How do you feel about the NL Central? How do you feel about either or both of those results yesterday?
Yeah, same way I felt yesterday. We talked about it as well. If you're trying to just break down the two teams, we know the strength of the Milwaukee Brewers is their front-end starting pitching now. Their bullpen takes a little bit of a hit by moving on from Hader, so it equals that up with the St. Louis Cardinals. But if we're just looking for lineup prowess here, 1 through 9, by far, it's the St. Louis Cardinals. And yesterday, took a look at Montgomery on the mound. He's been sensational for the St. Louis Cardinals, and one of the few times I took a run line full game, and it worked out well with a 5-1 victory over the Colorado Rockies. Anytime you can get the Rockies outside of Colorado, that's what you anticipate. And what more do you want out of the Brewers? It's hard to say, we're going to play a series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Let's hope that we can win the series itself. You're more than likely just hoping to win a game from them. But if we're looking at the matchups now, a minus 290 the rest of the way, my thought process isn't going to change, even if the two schedules, flip back and forth, and we might be looking at a dead heat once we're around September 15th. I still trust the Cardinals more than I do the Brewers, because if I need base hits, I can get them with the Cardinals. I'm not so sure I get them as consistently with the Milwaukee Brewers.
It also just, again, flashes the reminder that strength of schedule matters. I've made it a point to talk about it here on this show, and you've often seen what the strength of schedule is telling us. The odds are backing it up. They're agreeing. They're seeing a similar outcome. The other thing, though, I wanted to talk about from this game here quickly, or from these games, were some pitching performances. And I'll start with this. Tony Gonsolin from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Did we worry? Depends who you are. But this is right back to form. 7 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 8 Ks, just 1 walk. Because for a while, man, what a luxury, Tony Gonsolin, this good. No. This is a game 1 starter. Look at this. Am I crazy here? Am I off base? Is this not their game number 1 starter? The Los Angeles Dodgers and Tony Gonsolin? This is what they need from him. If the Dodgers are World Series or bust. There is no second place for this baseball team. They need Tony Gonsolin to be at this level if they are going to achieve their goal. Had to be big for Dodgers backers to see this performance.
No, it was big, but also my favorite part about this, too, is it's the Dodgers, so you anticipate it. Like, we were worried about a guy that sits today, August 18th, with a 15-1 record and an ERA of 2.12. Like, think about that. Like, that's how we have to nitpick the Los Angeles Dodgers, where a pitcher has a couple rough starts and say, you know what? We didn't think Tony Gonsolin was on the up and up like a Walker Buehler would be or a Clayton Kershaw, but it looks like he's every bit playing that part. And the Dodgers, you're right. Lining him up, he's your all-star pitcher, I should say, but he is the guy that is lining up in the ALCS as game one, the NLCS, whatever division series, the World Series. He's your A1. He's going to get the job done. I do think so.
And for the St. Louis Cardinals, is Jordan Montgomery your number one? Well, if he keeps this up, he is. My goodness. 3 starts, 1 run allowed, which is good for a tidy .54 ERA, has just been phenomenal for them. He's only allowed 12 hits over the 16 2/3 innings right now, 17 strikeouts back-to-back, 8 strikeout games for Jordan Montgomery. The St. Louis Cardinals needed to add some pitching, and Montgomery and Quintana from yesterday both have been super solid. We'll close out with some more Major League Baseball headlines. It's our number 1 of the early line.
The early line.
Can Cease become the favorite in this market by the result of this baseball game?
I don't think so, because we have to remind ourselves, this isn't, Dylan Cease pitching to Justin Verlander, and that's the head-to-head matchup, and who wins it gets the title belts, right? I mean, that's not the way it works here. You actually are taking a look at this game saying, how is Verlander going to do up against that Chicago White Sox lineup? How is Cease going to do against that Astros lineup?
Only on Sports Grid. Your heart's racing. The clock's running out. It all comes down to this. We're talking pregame. Pregame. Get locked in with Game Time Decisions. Your hosts, Gabe Morency and Cam Stewart, will get you ready for game time. Everything you need to know before a game goes off the board, with the bet slips to back it up. Make your best bet with live odds updates, late breaking news, up-to-the-minute injury reports, and real-time analytics from inside the sportsbooks. All the odds, all the action, from sports wagering insiders and industry pros like Donnie Rightside, Cam Lou, Cousin Sal, the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chow, and more. Get the winning edge every weekday afternoon from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, 3 to 4 Pacific. It's Game Time Decisions. Only on Sports Grid.
Maurice Allen, 2015-2016 European Long Drive Tour champion, 2017 world number 1. Me personally, I keep my game face on me all the time. Especially coming out of the bunker, leaving the range, or even leaving the course. What's your story?
Pharrell, coast to coast.
Tell me why you're so high on Herbert and the Chargers. They never get it done.
Number 1 is injuries. This team seems to be snake bit. If that goes their way this year, the only thing that's going to prevent them is coaching. The coaching and the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, he has a strong-armed, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert, who is young and can throw the ball all over the field. And they have one of the shortest target depths of any team in the NFL.
The Sports Grid Network.
San Diego Padres yesterday were getting after it in a major way. 10 runs scored by the Padres, still flashing that ceiling that we know this offense can bring. One thing I wanted to mention here that stood out to me from this game, I don't know what caught your eye, was Manny Machado. Again, with a multi-hit performance. I'm not positive, but he might have multiple hits in every single game that has been played since Juan Soto showed up to this building. Manny Machado, again, I do not know if anybody is going to catch Goldschmidt. His odds have only grown longer, but we said this, or I did at least, and not that you disagreed, from game number 1 that Soto showed up. Soto is phenomenal, and that's really going to help Machado because Soto is going to be on base almost every single time that Machado gets up to that plate, allowing Machado to get pitches to hit, and boy, is he taking advantage of it.
No, he's really taking advantage of it, and rightfully so at this point. He didn't make, $300 million contract just because he was an average baseball player, but you needed to surround him with talent for him to initially excel, and that's what's happening now. Just Juan Soto, and it's a shame because Fernando Tatis is not going to be back this year and for most parts of April next season. That would have been really incredible to see Soto with the 2-hole, Machado with the 3, and maybe Tatis in the 4-hole, and watch all those fastballs coming down the pike because you can't pitch around 3 straight guys here. It's a shame that's happened, but Manny Machado is going to be the centerpiece of this franchise here moving forward, at least through the playoffs this year.
He has an 8-game streak of multiple hits. That, guys get pumped up when they have an 8-game hit streak.
Yes,
an 8-game multi-hit streak for Manny Machado is just absolutely phenomenal. And again, right now, you have Juan Soto batting .320 in a Padres uniform with a .469 on-base percentage. That's because he's Juan Soto, and that's what you expect from this guy. Up next, you better believe it, baby. It is NBA headlines. There's about 1 million of them. Could it take the entire hour? I had to stop Donnie. I didn't want to let him go wild, but that's where we start hour number 2.